It was a warm morning in a quiet village in Burkina Faso. The sun had just risen, and the air was still cool. Chickens were running around, and the sound of goats echoed through the fields. People were starting their day, getting ready for work, cooking food, and talking with neighbors. In this peaceful village lived a farmer named Yakuba. He was an old man with a kind smile and a slow walk. Yakuba had one donkey named Koko. Koko was not like other donkeys. He was stubborn and strange, but very strong. Yakuba used Koko to carry goods to the market every week. On this day, Yakuba tied a few sacks of yams onto Koko's back and began his short journey to the nearby market. As they walked, something unusual happened. Koko stopped in the middle of a narrow dirt road and refused to move. He just stood there. Yakuba pulled the rope, shouted, and even offered him a banana. But Koko stayed still. His big brown eyes stared ahead, and he didn't move an inch. A few villagers passing by stopped to watch. "Is Koko tired already?" one man asked, laughing. "Maybe he knows something we don't," said an old woman nearby. They all chuckled and shook their heads. Koko had a reputation for acting strange, but this time he seemed even more serious. No one could understand why he chose to block that road on this particular day. A few meters behind them, the road led to a small forest path, and then toward another village. It was a road used mostly by farmers, traders, and sometimes by travelers passing through. No one thought it was important, but today that road was going to be used by someone special. Unseen by most villagers, a dusty black pickup truck was slowly approaching from behind. Inside the truck sat a man who didn't dress or act like a normal politician. He wore simple clothes and had a calm face. It was Ibrahim Traore, the young president of Burkina Faso. President Traoré was on his way to visit the village without telling anyone. He often made these surprise visits to talk to people directly and understand their problems. He didn't bring a long convoy or a group of bodyguards. Only two aides sat with him in the car. The president believed in staying close to the people, and that meant traveling simply. As the vehicle moved forward, the driver suddenly hit the brakes. Right in the middle of the road stood Koko, refusing to move. The driver honked. Nothing. He shouted out the window. Koko didn't care. The donkey stood still, strong and stubborn, blocking the path like a guard. President Traoré leaned forward and looked out the window. He laughed. "Let him be," he said. "Maybe he has something important to say." None of them knew at that moment that this simple, stubborn donkey had just started something much bigger than a traffic delay. President Ibrahim Traore sat calmly in the back seat of the pickup truck. The vehicle was not fancy, just an old black truck that had seen many miles. The driver and one aide sat in the front. They all looked at the donkey standing firmly in the road. The driver honked again and slowly tried to edge forward, hoping the donkey would move. But Koko didn't care. He didn't flinch or even look at the truck. He stood like a statue. The road was too narrow to drive around him. There were small ditches on both sides, filled with dry grass and rocks. President Traoré leaned forward, smiling. "This donkey seems to be in charge today," he joked. His aide laughed softly. The president wasn't in a hurry. He had come to the village for a surprise visit. He wanted to meet local farmers, talk with elders, and hear the real problems people were facing. This was something he often did. He didn't trust reports on paper. He wanted to hear from the people themselves. That's why he traveled with only 2 or 3 people. No loud sirens, no long motorcades. Just a quiet visit, like a neighbor coming over. Meanwhile, up ahead, beyond the next bend in the road, there was something no one in the truck could see. Behind a group of trees, hidden by tall grass, a small group of armed men was waiting. They wore plain clothes and kept their guns low. They were not bandits. They were trained, silent, and ready. They had been waiting since early morning. These men were not part of any official army unit. They were part of a hidden group with dangerous plans. Their goal was to stop President Traoré's vehicle, take control, and send a message. Some of them were angry about changes the president had made. Others were simply paid to cause trouble. The men were sure the president's truck would pass by around this time. They had picked this spot because it was quiet, far from cameras, and easy to control. But they didn't know that a donkey named Koko had decided to stand in the middle of the road and hold up everything. Back near the village, people began to gather near the truck. A few children pointed and laughed at the scene. The president opened his door and stepped out. He greeted a few villagers and smiled warmly. "Is this your donkey?" he asked Yakuba, who was still trying to move Koko with no success. "Yes, sir," Yakuba said, a bit embarrassed. He's never done this before. Well, the president said with a grin, maybe today he has a reason. The sun rose higher. The delay continued, but no one knew that this small strange pause on a dusty road was doing something incredible. It was buying time. Time that would soon make all the difference. The hot sun was now shining brighter in the sky. The village road, usually quiet, had turned into a small gathering place. Children played nearby, laughing at the donkey that refused to move. Some adults stood with curious eyes, watching the strange event unfold. President Ibrahim Traore stood calmly beside his vehicle. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, and there was no sign of stress on his face. He didn't act like a man in danger or someone in a hurry. He kept smiling and talking with the people. Koko is a brave one, he said, patting the donkey's neck gently. Maybe he thinks he's protecting someone. The villagers laughed. They liked the president's humble behavior. He didn't act proud or distant. He spoke like a friend, not like a leader. Meanwhile, Yakuba, the donkey's owner, was still trying to move Koko. He pulled the rope again. Come on, Koko, we have work to do, he whispered. But Koko didn't listen. He kept standing firm, looking straight ahead, as if guarding something important. The driver of the truck stepped out and wiped sweat from his forehead. Sir, maybe we should take another road, he suggested. There's no time for shortcuts, Aide replied. And that road ahead is the only one that leads to the village we're visiting. President Traore looked at the road in front of them. Tall trees stood on both sides. It looked peaceful, just like any other rural path. But something in his heart felt strange. Still, he said nothing. He simply leaned back against the truck and watched the scene unfold. Far ahead, behind those trees, the group of armed men was getting restless. They were growing nervous. One of them peeked through the leaves and saw no vehicle coming. Another checked his watch. They should have passed by now, one man said. Maybe they changed their route, another replied. No, said their leader. They always take this road. Something must have happened. The longer they waited, the more worried they became. They had a plan. It needed to happen quickly and quietly. But the delay was making things fall apart. Back near the donkey, a young boy pointed at the president's shoes and said, You have dust on your feet, sir. President Traore smiled and nodded. It means I'm in the right place, he said. The real work starts where there's dust. The villagers clapped softly. They respected this man who didn't mind walking dusty roads or being delayed by a donkey. Koko finally made a small sound. He lifted one hoof and shifted a bit, but still didn't move off the road. It was as if he was waiting for something, or maybe holding back danger without even knowing it. Nobody, not even the president, could guess that this strange delay was stopping something dark and dangerous just up ahead. Far ahead of the stopped vehicle, beyond the curve in the road, the air was quiet but heavy. Behind a row of trees and tall grass, the group of armed men continued to wait. They were hiding, watching the road carefully, expecting to see the black pickup truck arrive any minute. Their leader was a man named Cater. He wore dark sunglasses and spoke little. He had once been part of the military, but he had left under angry conditions. He didn't like the changes that President Traore was making in the country. To him, the young president was moving too fast, taking power away from bold groups and giving it to the people. Kader wanted to send a message. He thought that by stopping the president's visit today, he would prove a point and shake the system. He had chosen this quiet road because there were no cameras, no soldiers, and no signs of security. It seemed like the perfect place for an ambush. But now, the plan wasn't going smoothly. It's been almost 20 minutes, one of the men whispered. Where is he? Kader checked his watch again. Something's wrong. The driver should have reached this spot a long time ago. A few of the men started moving nervously. Their hiding spot didn't feel so safe anymore. The longer they stayed, the more likely someone would see them. In the distance, they heard the faint sound of a hunter's whistle. That didn't worry them at first, until they saw a man with a rifle walk by on a far trail, staring in their direction. That man was Adama, a local hunter. He often moved through these parts early in the day. When he noticed the strange group of men lying low in the bushes, he didn't speak or stop. But he saw enough to know something was not right. He quietly turned away and began walking faster, heading toward the nearby military post. Back near the village road, the sun was now high in the sky. Koko, the donkey, finally sat down in the middle of the road. This brought more laughter from the villagers. President Traore was still standing with the people, asking questions about farming and local schools. He didn't act worried at all. A few meters behind him, the aide got a quiet phone call from a contact in the area. His face changed. He whispered to the driver and moved close to the president. "Sir," he said in a low voice, "we just received a message. There may be something ahead, a possible threat. A local hunter has reported armed men hiding near the bend." President Traore raised his eyebrows. He looked toward the road ahead, then back at the donkey. "So, this is why our friend didn't move," he said softly. Koko, still sitting calmly in the dust, had unknowingly stopped the president from walking straight into a trap. The message was clear now. Something dangerous was waiting on the road ahead. The quiet visit had suddenly become serious. President Traore remained calm, but his eyes were focused. He listened carefully to his aide's words. "A hunter saw the group," the aide said in a low voice. "He's already warned the local gendarmerie. They're on their way." Traore nodded slowly. He looked down at Koko, still sitting in the road like a stone. "I think we all owe this donkey a thank you," he said. The driver quickly turned the vehicle around and parked it at a safer spot, just off the road. Villagers, now sensing something was wrong, stepped back and watched quietly. Yakuba stood beside his donkey, looking confused. "Is there a problem, sir?" he asked the president. Traore placed a hand on Yakuba's shoulder. "Not your fault, my friend. In fact, your donkey might have saved my life." Yakuba's eyes widened. "Koko? But he just sat down like always. He's stubborn, not a hero." Traore smiled. "Sometimes a stubborn heart knows what a wise man cannot see." Meanwhile, in the forest ahead, the group of armed men was falling apart. The longer they waited, the more nervous they became. Kader, their leader, was trying to stay calm, but the silence in the trees now felt different. Birds had gone quiet. Something had changed. Then the sound came, a crackling radio signal followed by footsteps. Kader's eyes darted toward the road. From the side, hidden in the bushes, a small unit of gendarmerie officers suddenly appeared, guns raised and voices firm. "Drop your weapons. Hands up." The attackers were caught off guard. Some dropped their guns immediately. Others tried to run. 2 men were captured within seconds. Kader tried to escape through the trees, but another officer circled around and stopped him. The ambush was broken before it could even begin. Back at the village, news came quickly through a radio call from the officer in charge. The aide answered, listened, then turned to the president. "They've stopped the group, sir. No shots fired. All under control." President Traore closed his eyes for a moment and breathed deeply. The danger had passed. Not because of high technology, not because of strong weapons, but because a donkey sat in the road at the right time. He turned toward the villagers. "There was a plan to stop us on that road," he said quietly. "But something, or someone, gave us time." People looked at one another in surprise. They turned their eyes to Koko, still resting in the dirt, chewing lazily on a bit of grass. The same donkey they had laughed at was now being looked at differently. "He saved the president," a young girl whispered. "No," said Yakuba with a smile. "He saved all of us." The village was quiet now, but the feeling in the air had changed. People were no longer laughing just at the donkey's behavior. They were whispering to each other, sharing the news that something serious had almost happened. President Ibrahim Traore stood near the truck, looking at the road ahead where he had almost driven. He thought about how close he had come to danger without even knowing it. He looked again at Koko, still sitting in the road, chewing slowly and blinking like nothing had happened. The local police soon arrived and confirmed everything. The armed group had been arrested. The officers thanked the hunter, Adama, who had seen the men and alerted them in time. Without him, and without the strange delay caused by Koko, things could have ended very badly. President Traore called the hunter forward and shook his hand. "Your eyes were sharp and your steps were brave," he said. "Thank you." Adama bowed slightly. "It was the donkey that gave me time, sir. I was lucky to pass when I did." The president smiled and turned to Yakuba. "And your donkey, he didn't just block the road. He changed the course of the day." Yakuba scratched his head, still trying to understand how his stubborn animal could do something so important. He just didn't want to walk. "I thought he was being lazy." Sometimes the truth is stranger than what people expect. President Traore decided to cancel the rest of the visit. The safety of his team and the villagers came first. Before leaving, he gathered everyone near the roadside and spoke to them. "I came here today to talk about farms, roads, and schools. I thought I would be the one asking questions, but instead this village taught me something powerful." The people stood quietly, listening closely. "We often think heroes must wear uniforms or carry weapons. But today, a donkey reminded us that even the smallest action can save lives. And a hunter with sharp eyes became the voice that warned us." He paused and looked around. This is why I visit villages like yours, not just to bring change, but to learn. Today, I learned that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just stands in the road and refuses to move. There was silence for a moment, then soft clapping. It grew louder. The villagers cheered, proud of what their village and their animals had done. The president waved goodbye and stepped into his truck. Before driving off, he looked at Koko one last time. "Take care of this road, friend," he said. The truck turned around and headed back to the city. The danger was gone. But the story of what happened that day would soon spread far and wide. About a donkey who saved a president without even knowing it. In the days that followed, news of the strange but powerful event spread across the country. People couldn't believe it at first. A donkey had saved the president. It sounded like a folk tale, something from an old village story. But it was real. Radio stations began to talk about it. Local newspapers printed headlines like, "Donkey delays president, stops deadly plot," and Koko the hero of the village. Even in the city, people were talking. Everyone wanted to know more about the donkey, the farmer, and the day that changed everything. Yakuba was shocked by the attention. Reporters came to his home, asking about Koko. He answered with a quiet smile, saying, "He is just a donkey. He doesn't know he's famous." But deep inside, Yakuba felt proud. He had raised Koko from a young age. The donkey had always been stubborn, always difficult. But now, that stubbornness had saved lives. President Ibrahim Traore made sure to send a personal message to the village. In it, he thanked the people, the hunter, and especially Koko. He also sent supplies to the village, medicine, food, and school materials, as a sign of his gratitude. A small team of engineers arrived too, to look at the roads and water systems. But the most surprising gift was a wooden signboard that the president had made. It was placed at the entrance of the village. On it were the words, "Welcome to the village of the donkey that saved a president." Children gathered around the sign every day, proud of what their home had become. Koko, however, was still the same. He walked slowly. He stopped when he wanted. He ignored noise, cameras, and even the occasional banana treat offered by visitors. He didn't care for fame. One day, a group of school children from the nearby town visited the village to see Koko. Their teacher said, "This is a lesson about courage, even when it comes from the most unexpected place." The children watched as Koko stood under a tree, blinking slowly and chewing grass. They laughed and waved at him, though he barely noticed. Meanwhile, Yakuba had built a small shaded shelter for Koko, using wood and straw. "He's not just my donkey anymore," he said to a neighbor. "He belongs to all of us now." And somewhere far away, President Traore sat in his office, thinking about that day. He remembered the dust on his shoes, the laughter of children, and the quiet way Koko refused to move. He knew that moment had changed more than just his schedule. It had reminded him that leadership wasn't about power, but about listening, slowing down, and paying attention. And just like that, the donkey who never followed orders became a quiet symbol of wisdom, luck, and unexpected protection. Months had passed since the day Koko the donkey blocked the road. But the memory of that strange morning still lived in the hearts of many. The story became a favorite among storytellers in villages and towns. People shared it at gatherings under trees and around fires at night. Some laughed, some nodded in respect, and others felt deep pride. In the capital city, students wrote essays about Koko. Artists painted pictures of the moment he stood in the middle of the dusty road. A few musicians even created songs about the day the donkey stood still. It was a simple tale, but it carried meaning about fate, timing, and how small things can make a big difference. President Ibrahim Traore often thought about that day. Whenever he faced difficult decisions, he remembered Koko. The delay had taught him patience. The warning from the hunter reminded him to trust the people. And the quiet strength of a village reminded him that power comes not only from the top, but from the ground, from the people, from the land. One morning, the president sent a surprise invitation. Yakuba and Adama, the hunter, were asked to visit the capital. At first, they didn't believe it. But soon, a clean white vehicle arrived in the village to pick them up. It was the first time Yakuba had ever left the area. They were welcomed with respect at the presidential office. The president shook their hands warmly. He gave Adama a new hunting rifle and binoculars as thanks for his courage. To Yakuba, he handed a gold medal tied with a red ribbon. "This," Traore said, "is for Koko." Yakuba laughed. "He won't wear it, sir, but I'll keep it safe." The president nodded. "Tell him I still remember, and I still thank him." During the visit, the president made a short speech on national TV. In the middle of his words, he paused and smiled. Then he said, "Sometimes we move too fast. We rush through life, always trying to get somewhere. But once in a while, something or someone makes us stop. And that pause can save us." He looked straight at the camera and added, "So next time the road is blocked, don't just get angry. Look around. Maybe it's not a delay. Maybe it's a message." And somewhere far away, back in the quiet village, Koko stood once again in the middle of the road. Yakuba called him, trying to guide him back to the farm. But Koko just stared forward and refused to move. Some habits never change. Villagers walked by, smiling at the sight. A boy whispered to his friend, "He's guarding the road again." And as the sun set over the dry hills, the road remained calm, safe, and watched, not by soldiers or cameras, but by a silent, stubborn donkey who had once staved a president.